So, you should have just read a piece by a 20th century British philosopher called A.J. Ayer, who was enormously influential in the spread of a particular philosophical movement that was called logical positivism. He also happened to be a keen supporter of Tottenham Hotspur, or Spurs, a British soccer team, the supporting of whom is an indication of intellectual strength and good morals. Now, very few people would still call themselves logical positivists today. The movement has gone out of fashion, and for good reason. And here's one reason from the horse's mouth. This is a very brief clip of Ayer himself in the good old days when you could still show two philosophers discussing philosophy on BBC television. And in this discussion of logical positivism, Ayer has explained what it is, and then is asked by Brian McGee, also a philosopher, the following question. You may have to turn the volume up here quite loud to hear what's going on. Hold on a moment.
Now, it must have had actually some real defects. What do you now, in retrospect, think of the main shortcoming?
Well, I suppose most of the defects is that nearly all of it was false.
I think you need to say a little more about that.
Well,
now, the point of showing you this, other than that it's quite amusing to see Ayer admitting about 40 years after he wrote the seminal work on logical positivism that most of it was false, is that I want you to understand that, like many other disciplines, philosophy has its trends. It has periods when a particular way of doing philosophy seems to be accepted as just what philosophy is by large numbers within the profession, yet what seemed obvious to them might seem to be fundamentally mistaken to the next generation, or even to some thinkers in the very same generation. And it might well get overturned by a new theory or set of theories which themselves may or may not stick. So, the reason I'm telling you this is that while the piece that you've just read, which I should mention for academic philosophy, is actually a beautifully clear piece of writing, I realize it may not have struck you that way immediately when you were reading it, but what you've read seems terribly authoritative, as if it's simply telling you exactly what everyone thinks philosophical method is. But many philosophers would actually disagree with almost everything that Ayer writes here. Now, you don't need to worry about that too much. On the one hand, there are people who do still follow that type of philosophical method up to a point, and regardless, it's a very useful way to get into doing philosophy, even if it's not the single method of doing philosophy. To be honest, there are philosophers today who would even question the very idea that philosophy has some type of unique method. But the point is, whatever you read, you should read critically. You should be asking yourself as you read whether a philosopher has given you convincing reasons for his view. Reasons and arguments are essential to philosophy, and we'll be learning more about them next week. But the point is, it's not enough just to shout your opinions. You need to argue for them. So if you find yourself uncomfortable with the view presented or unconvinced, ask yourself why. Your discomfort might reflect real reasons to reject a view, though sometimes, of course, it might just turn out that the truth is uncomfortable. With that out of the way, we're going to review some of the main things that Ayer wishes to establish in this piece, relating in particular to the question with which your final exercise is going to be concerned: what is knowledge? And let's begin with a word about the question, though, of method, because here we're taking knowledge as our example and asking what it is. And one of their central points is that when philosophers do this, it's not as if they expect to make some kind of scientific discovery or do a test in a laboratory to find out the answer. All the relevant facts, as he points out, are there already. More than that, we all use the word knowledge perfectly well. We talk about what people do or don't know quite happily. So we don't seem to be looking for a dictionary definition of knowledge either. We already seem to know what knowledge is from that perspective, and so what is it that philosophers are looking for? Now, Ayer's answer, and remember this may or may not be correct, is that philosophers are looking to give a philosophical analysis of knowledge. Now, what that means is probably best explained through examples of the kinds of questions we would ask when we're giving a philosophical analysis. So, for example, we might ask, what do all the different types of knowledge have in common that makes them all knowledge? Take triangles, for example. Triangles can be pink, red, blue, large, small, right-angled, equilateral, but none of those properties are the properties that make them triangles. You could change up any of those properties, you'd still have a triangle. But the fact that it's a closed three-sided polygon, that's different. If any of our triangles ceased to have that property, they would no longer be triangles. That is the essence of what it is to be a triangle. It's the triangle's essential property. We would also say that it's a necessary condition for being a triangle. You can't be a triangle without it. It also happens to be what we would call a sufficient condition for being a triangle, meaning if you have that property, if you are a closed three-sided polygon, then you're automatically a triangle. Now here we're beginning to get into philosophical analysis, and maybe this is the kind of thing philosophers are looking for when they're analyzing concepts. To take our example of what is knowledge. What it is we're looking for are often called real definitions by philosophers. We're looking for essential properties. We're looking maybe for necessary conditions, sufficient conditions for what it is to be knowledge. The answer to that question, what actually is knowledge, what are those necessary and sufficient conditions, is something that we'll be looking at in the next mini tutorial.